What's going on, everybody? It is TripleCrown24 back with a new sports card psychology podcast, our Sweet 16, right? Episode number 16 of the show. Thanks for joining us once again. By us, I mean that I do have a guest once again today, and this is an interesting man. He's one of my very good friends, and I like to give him some grief being a good friend of mine about his collecting style. And I can see him in the green room right now. He's already got a smile on his face. I bet he knows where this is going. But it's kind of a running joke with him and I that he's a card collector who doesn't buy cards. And that might sound absolutely absurd. It sounds like probably a Seinfeld sketch. But really, he's mastered two ideas that we're going to kind of merge into one episode today, because I feel that they are almost co-linked in a way where it would be a disservice for me to not talk about both these things with him at once. Maybe there's not enough meat on the bone. There could be a part two. If you guys really enjoy it, you can let me know in the comments down below on YouTube, or give me your feedback wherever you may be listening. And that is these two concepts of a minimalist as a collector, which kind of, again, sounds like two contradicting things, and having what I would like to call a revolving collection. Now, we're going to define what those mean a little bit more closely, but so it's not just me sitting here. Why don't I go ahead and bring on my guest? He is on YouTube. He is one of my very good friends. We paid him a very large fee to be on this show, so I hope you're grateful for that. It is Andy, with the best name in the business. She blinded me with Refractors. How are we doing, my friend?
Doing good, JT. What an intro. Where do we even start with that intro?
I warned you that I do a cheesy 2-minute intro. There's been some that go up to 4 minutes. I think last week's show was like almost a 20-minute intro on my own. So 2 minutes.
No, I mean, I think you nailed it, man. Minimalist. I like that term because you can look around me. Like, I'm pretty much a minimalist in life in general. That's just kind of how I do things, I guess. So, but yeah, I'm excited to be here, JT. I know you've got some good topics for us to discuss. So let's dive in, man.
Let's do it. So I want you to stop me if you've heard any of these before. I have just way too many cards. My wife is telling me to get rid of all these cards, or my spouse is telling me to get rid of all these cards. I just have too many cards that I don't know what to do with. I keep buying boxes and the cards keep piling up. I bought this collection and now all these cards are sitting here. Is any of this ringing a bell for you? I'm sure there's some people screaming at me now listening to this, so they've probably heard some of these things before too.
Now, I was going to let you go for a little while. So those are things that I've experienced all of those things at some point, in my collecting journey, as we'll call it. Because I mean, I've been doing this for, I started collecting in 1987. So, I've been doing this for a long time. So I've went through a lot of different cycles, periods. I've seen stuff go way high, come way back down, go back, all these different things. And there's definitely been times where all of those things that you mentioned, I've, had that issue, too many cards, all that stuff. So yeah, I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, if you're on YouTube, you can see I literally have boxes right here on the ground next to me that I'm working on right now, and some of that is bulky stuff that probably could just be put into the value boxes. So I've heard it too, and I'm sure pretty much every collector you've talked to has said one of those things or something along that ilk at some point in time. And it comes naturally with collecting. If you actually look in the thesaurus, I know I'm bringing out the thesaurus here, and you look at collecting, hoarding is a synonym of it. And I think hoarding gets a much more negative connotation, and rightfully so, with collecting. But in some sense, it is a practice of stockpiling and hoarding cards to build your collection, whatever you may call your collection. But in your case, I want to know what do you define as your collection? And I typically try to avoid solid numbers on this show to make points unless I feel it's really instrumental to it. But I think this is one of the times that I'll make an exception. About how many cards do you think that you have in your collection right now? And then kind of give me what's the inflow and outflow of cards over the past month. How many cards have you had come in? And how many have you sold or moved on from?
So typically with my collection, like I'm not sure of an exact number. I would have to really count, but I like to be able to basically fit like, and this excludes, if you have like a set or something like that. But as far as singles go, I like to be able to fit my collection basically in a backpack where I can carry it around with me. If you've ever seen me at a show with my backpack on, yeah, my collection is in there usually because I like to take it because the way I've kind of got to this point where there's cards that I like and there's cards that I love. Now, any card that I have in my possession is something that I like. Now, if I see something that I love, that's where, some of the wheeling and dealings can come into effect. So, yeah, like and like you said, it's always revolving. I'm not one of those people like I don't think that there's any card that I necessarily feel like I have to have forever. And there probably are a few, I guess, but those are cards that they're not valuable or anything like that. Like I'm always willing, if I see something I like more than what I have, let's make a deal.
That's fair enough. And it would take a very large backpack, I think, for most other people out there listening to this to fit everything that they have into a backpack. And you know what? I'm sure you've got maybe like a 3,200 count box somewhere or something.
Sure.
All of us have those types of things. But in terms of like your core collection and the cards that are close to you, yeah, I have seen it at shows. They fit nicely into one showcase, and it's a lot of really quality cards in there. So in a way that you are a minimalist, you kind of have you have great variety in your collection from what I've seen. You mix it up with the vintage and then the more modern stuff. You mix up the different sports. So it's very diversified in that sense too, which is very difficult to achieve, I think, without building this massive collection, or at least in mine, it feels like that's you kind of get to live out what most collectors think of when they're thinking of building a collection, but you do so without really having to go overboard. And I know that you mentioned that before you were kind of in the camp of those who maybe had those issues of having too many cards. So why have you become this way? So to quote Michael Scott from The Office, why are you the way that you are?
That's probably, man, there's probably a lot of people that would like to know the answer to that. Why am I the way that I am? For me, it's just when you collect for a long time, as you know, you will accumulate things, and over time your tastes in cards change. Like maybe this year you're really into this sport for whatever reason. Maybe this player came along and you're just really into that. And maybe a year later that changes. I'm not afraid to change when it comes to my collecting. If there's something that at one point that I've really loved, I mean, I'm not married to it though, right? Like I can let go if there's something, if my interest has taken me in a different direction, which over the last year or so, like that direction for me has been with the UFC cards. And you see all these videos about people, people are getting accused of, pumping this or pumping that just because they changed, what they collect. For me, I have to like the sport because I watch sports, like, and honestly, if I had to choose between watching sports or collecting, I would choose watching sports because that's where all this stuff originates for me. So the UFC stuff, it kind of started as, me getting back to watching the sport because I used to watch it when I was younger. And then secondly, the price point. a lot of the basketball, football, baseball stuff that I liked had really just, you know, to the moon, right? And this was a sport that you could still get the very best fighters at really affordable prices when you looked at it compared to the other sports. So yeah, like I just feel like I always have to be open to change and be willing to, you know, switch it up when I feel like I need to, just to keep it fun because that's what it's all about, right?
Absolutely, and you're a collector. I mean, you do sell cards, but I'm in the mindset that you can sell cards and still be a collector. I think it's silly to think otherwise, to make it that black and white with that. But it to me, it seems just following your UFC journey, and perhaps this is my own perception that maybe you've added a bit more quantity. The cards you're picking up are still very quality cards. Let's not joke ourselves here. If you go, Andy has a YouTube channel, you see it there. His name, Shibani with Refractors. If you go check out his latest video, it's fantastic. He shows some very quality cards, but it's more cards than I'm used to seeing you, I guess, acquire or get back from grading in that amount of time as compared to what I've seen in maybe past years. Would you agree with that? That maybe the UFC stuff you're adding a bit more in terms of quantity, or is it just kind of, I don't know, my own misjudgment there?
No, it is for sure. And one of the things that I kind of already mentioned was the price point. The UFC stuff is, I mean, it's like I said, it's relatively cheap. Like when you like to collect, like, you know, gold refractors or, just refractors in general of, some of the best people in whatever sport it may be, they're relatively cheap compared to a lot of the other ones. So I can get more bang for my buck with that. And you've seen you if you watch the video, like there's a couple of fighters that I really like. And sometimes, like you were talking about hoarding earlier, like there's some of these cards that I've picked up several of them, and ultimately they'll probably be used, the duplicates will probably be used to trade for something different. I think if you have something that you really like, I tend to go after it pretty hard, and then transition from there. Because I mean, you go to these card shows, a lot of people, they're going to be interested in different things, and people like to wheel and deal. They want to trade, so it's always good to have extras of stuff that you really like. Because if you've been doing this for a long time, a lot of the stuff that you tend to gravitate towards, other people, probably will as well. So it's good to have those extras.
Right. I always have, it's a bit different circumstance for me just because it's a livelihood for me where it's a hobby for you. But yeah, having those cards in kind of in your back pocket to be able to trade at any point in time. And I think part of it too, like you will probably know much more about them than the dealer would too, or whoever you're trading with. So when you talk about them, that passion comes through. Like I don't know very much about UFC cards. I'll be the first to admit it. But when I watch your videos, I don't have to know anything about UFC cards to know that you appreciate them and they're valuable to you. And that, in sense, makes it feel like they're more valuable to me as well, just because that passion, it's genuine, and people do gravitate towards that genuine emotion. So, um, with that said, you did mention that eventually they could be something that are just traded into one nicer card. I've seen you do that several times where you'll move two or three cards into one nicer one. Um, how does that make you feel? I mean, of course, you're getting the nicer card, so that has to bring some kind of excitement. But do you take any kind of pride or joy into kind of taking, I guess, your bulk and turning it into maybe some kind of jewel, or smushing everything together and you get some kind of treasure out of it?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about this is, and I've talked to a lot of people about this over the last several years when we've seen this big, explosion in as far as the values of cards go. A lot of times people, they get the wrong idea that just because you have some cards that are, valuable now, they think that, they just assume that you make a lot of money or all the, and that's not really the case with me. Like over the past, whatever time period that this hobby has shot up, like, my income has relatively been the same. So with the increasing price of some of these big cards that you want to go after, you have to find a way to get them. And so one of the things that I've done is, kind of try to consolidate some of the stuff into getting those because, you know, like if you saw well, you were there at that Dallas show where I made the trade for the Russell Westbrook, the Topps Chrome Gold Refractor. Like, I mean, I'm not the kind of guy that's going to be able to pull out, thousands and thousands of dollars and just be like, here, yeah, I'll buy it. I'm the kind of guy that's like, I have a little money and I have these cards I can trade you. So yeah, like I use them as tools to try to, better my collection. Like when I set up at these shows, I sell stuff just to buy other stuff, really, card wise. That's kind of what I do.
Fair enough. Yeah, that was the way when I first started setting up at shows. I was very similar to that mindset, and yeah, I have seen you wheel and deal with that. It does feel nice too, as someone who does trade a lot. I will definitely echo your sentiment there that I'm not someone who is if I see $1,000 card, the likelihood of me dropping $1,000 on the table is significantly lower than me maybe dropping a couple $100 and then adding in the cards like the trout plate that I got at the National last year. That was, a card that they valued at $1,000, but I think I maybe only spent 200 to 300 if I'm remembering correctly on that card. So I only had to pull out a fraction of the cost from my actual wallet, and that felt good to use what I already had. So I totally, appreciate that. And you kind of get to move some lower end cards into something nicer. So that's something that is relatable for me, at least, and I'm sure anyone else who has trading experience can relate to that. But on that note, I want to ask this. This is kind of a broader topic here, but decluttering is something that maybe we hear with like collections or eliminating the noise. I've heard that metaphor used before, which I think is a great descriptor of this process. And being a minimalist, one of the things that is kind of associated with it is that when you're consolidating, clearing up space, it's positive for your mental health too, right? Like we like things that are nice and organized and to the point. Have you found that really that you've enjoyed the hobby more taking this approach, or do you think that it's limited some of your experiences, or maybe somewhere in between?
Um, to me, I, I don't know if I would necessarily say that it's that for me. For me, it's more like, like when we get back, like just going back to the trading thing for just a second, some people really frown upon that. Like, I mean, we both have friends that, they don't really sell anything, they don't trade anything. And to me, it kind of takes you back to the roots of this whole thing because these are called trading cards, right? So, I mean, that kind of takes me back to like when I was 8, 9 years old on the playground and we're trading cards. It's not like I'm going to get this card and I'm going to keep it forever. It's, we're trading cards, we're wheeling, dealing. And that's, to me, that is one of the fun parts of the hobby. So what was your question again? Like, I know I went off on a little.
No, you brought back a fond memory in my head too. I think I've probably said that before. It literally says on the packaging still like these are trading
Yeah,
cards.
trading cards. Yeah.
I remember the Upper Deck commercials from like the mid 2000s where it would show this kid like making these trades, and you'd be thinking like, what is this kid doing? This is a stupid trade. But it's because they used to have, I don't have an Upper Deck card handy, but they used to have these little codes on the back, and you could enter those codes and they get points. And it was kind of like a Dave and Buster's system. Like if you got enough points, you get like a PlayStation 3. I remember always trying to go for that when I was a kid, entering in all the little codes from your blaster box. But that tangent aside, I had to really with that for a moment. I really wanted to know, like, how does it impact kind of like your mental state in the hobby, like having this minimalist approach? Do you feel better knowing that like you have these few cards that you're very passionate about, as opposed to maybe more cards, but you're not as connected to them, I guess you could say?
Yes, the answer to that would be yes, completely. And it doesn't really have it doesn't have as much to do with like the total volume of cards. For me, it's really all about like it doesn't matter if I'm trading like 20 cards for one card or whatever it may be. It's just, would I rather have this one than that one? Because if you have if you have unlimited funds, like if I just had, unlimited funds, I would never sell a card or trade a card. I would just, buy more. I would just have everything. But just and everybody's situation is different. And just from my situation, the reason I kind of got to this point of being somewhat of a card minimalist was some of these cards that I really wanted to get, like these were good, the ones that are my favorites. That was going to be the only road for me to take to get some of those. And so I don't know if that's a great answer to your question, but that's to me that's really what it's about, is like which one would I rather have, if assuming you can't have both. Like it's like when you go to the ice cream store as a kid and your parents are like, you can have chocolate or vanilla, and you're like, well, I would like to have both, but I have to pick one, right?
But with your approach, I feel like you could get both, right? Because what you're doing is that I hear this all the time, where people will tell me what their dream card is in a conversation, and then they'll say, "But I'll never own that." And immediately, my first question in my head is, why? Why would you say that? Why would you limit yourself? Like, I mean, the number one barrier, as you mentioned, is most likely price, right? Like a lot of us, we don't have unlimited funds to spend on the hobby. But the way that you've done things, as you just said, you've acquired cards, and being able to trade these cards, and taking the approach you have, you've been able to acquire things that otherwise you probably wouldn't have been able to, or you wouldn't have wanted to, even if the money was there at that point in time. Do you think that your approach kind of, I guess, lowers the ceiling, so to speak? So let's just throw a common grail card out there, like a 52 mantle. Do you feel that your approach makes it more realistic to actually obtain something like that, as opposed to just going for it straight cash, homie?
Oh, yeah, for me it 100% does. Like, yeah, that the 52 mantle, like if that was like my absolute number one grail card, yeah, I mean, I've probably put myself in a position as far as card wise where I could probably trade, sell, do what I needed to do to get that card. That's and stuff like that. Now it's tough when you have to put like so much of your collection on the line to basically just get one card, because then you have to, I'm not saying I wouldn't do it, but you then have to basically almost restart a collection, what I mean? Like you could build up to this one huge card, but then you're like, well, now I got to start over essentially. I like, to me, I don't know. That would be a little bit tougher to do, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to just have one card. But
Right, right. Yeah, we're not going that extreme when we talk about minimalists. We like cards. It's not like we're trying to chop the number down to zero. But
right,
I
yeah.
yeah. So, but with your approach, it kind of leads into the second topic that we introduced at the beginning of this, and we've tiptoed around this and made reference to it a little bit. Is this idea of a revolving collection? And no, that's not this, like, it's not like a revolving debt. If you I went to go search revolving collection before the start of this show, as a little FYI, to see if I could see if anyone else had kind of talked about this, and all I got was ads about credit card debt. So that didn't work out as well as I had planned with this. But I don't know if it was necessarily you or if it was someone describing you, but I've heard this several times where your name has come up with this idea of a revolving collection. So what does that mean to you? How would you describe that?
Um, Revolving collection to me is I mean, I'm buying stuff that I like, and if an opportunity presents itself or I see something that I would rather have, I'm going to take these cards out of the collection, whether it be sell or trade, and move this one in. So, yeah, it's if you like a lot of people do these videos where each year they'll show like their top 50 cards or whatever, right? I mean, I would have a few that would be the same each year, but most of it would probably be different because I like to change things up. Like to me, this is all fun, and I'm I'm not just gonna I'm not gonna keep around a card just because other people think it's really important and you should keep it. For me, it has to be me that wants to keep it because ultimately it's my collection, right? And you can consult people like, what do you think about this or whatever, but ultimately you have to make that choice yourself. And I see that with a lot of newer people over the last couple of years that have come into the hobby, and they have what I would describe as a revolving collection. And I think their reasoning for it is probably different than mine because I think sometimes people they just kind of buy what other people say they should buy, right? Like this is an important card, so you should have it. So that's what they do. And I think eventually after a while, you probably get into where you feel more comfortable and you can kind of make those choices yourself. And some people may, they just haven't gotten there yet. Maybe they just don't have enough experience yet. So they're kind of like relying on others to kind of make choices for them. So I think more experience allows you to kind of you just kind of care less what other people think about what you buy. Because I mean, I buy stuff that not a lot of people would want.
Fair enough, but it's special to you, right?
Right, right. And
So I'm sorry, go ahead with your point.
when like people all the time talk about card prices, and they're like, "Oh, this person overpaid for this, or they got a steal on that." I mean, for me, it's more about how much is it worth to me, and that, when you're talking prices of cards, like every card is going to be worth a different amount to every person. Like there's cards out there that people will pay 20,000 for today. That I mean, I wouldn't buy it if it was 4 or 5,000. I mean, but I mean that doesn't mean that they're wrong for paying what they pay.
The interesting thing about that too is that you're based on your own gut feeling and what a card is worth to you. If we took everything that you have right now and we put it up at auction, we'll pick your favorite auction house, and we had Andy's collection. That's what's up for sale. And we pieced it out individually. I would bet that almost every single card we'd be seeing how much you plussed or made on that card, so to speak, from what you had into it and what you bought from it, which I think is very interesting because you're not necessarily paying all the attention on like what are the comps, so to speak. And a lot of the stuff that you're going after too, that kind of data I would say is irrelevant because there's just not enough of it to make a solid point there. So
Well, two points on that. The first one would be timing is very important in what you stated there, because yes, while most of the stuff that I have has probably gone up in value, it's all about when I bought it more than like, I think over the last couple of years, I think some people have made the mistake of they think they're a genius because everything they had went up. I mean, it was like that for most people. Um, the key to all this was like the people whose stuff probably went up the most were like the people that just collected. Like they didn't really care as much about the money. That's not why they bought it, and that's just one of the side benefits, I guess, of that. What was my second point? Do you know?
No idea.
I'm kind of all over the place.
No, so
Sorry.
am I. But I can, to play, volleyball with you or tennis with you here on that topic. It is quite ironic, isn't it, where you see the investor types and the flipper types and giving their tips about what to go after, but generally speaking, the most successful people in terms of buying what they have at the right time and kind of at your low point and comparing to what it is now are those who really have almost no interest in it. I won't say that they don't care about what their collection is worth. We've said this several times on the show before. Nobody buys something and says, "Man, I hope this is worthless tomorrow. That would be so sweet."
No,
It's we don't do that, but it is nice, definitely, to see what you put your money into, and you did it for fun. You can almost justify that cost. So but it is very ironic in that sense.
there is sort of a game aspect to it. Like, we both are good friends with Eric, and he talks a lot about how, sometimes you buy something because you want to be right. And there's that does play a part in it, whether people believe that or not. I think that everybody, you want to be right. If you're watching a game or you have a team, you want to be the guy that stands up and yells, "Yeah, this team is going to win the championship." Nobody else thinks that, but I do, because I can see things, right? Now, and I guess to my last point, like, I think over the last couple of years, people got confused. They thought they were maybe an expert on something just because the whole thing went up. And what you're seeing now is like some of those people that probably overestimated their knowledge as far as the hobby goes. Some of those people have started to drop out because, they see, yeah, maybe this is a little bit tougher than I thought. And, there's no shortcuts in this thing. Like, it doesn't matter how much money you have. Like, if you just want to come in right off the bat and start buying expensive stuff, but you don't know what you're buying really, that could be a problem.
Right, a fool and his money are soon parted, as they say. And you can your approach too, like we're talking about minimalist. Even just taking a very small amount of money and putting it into something, you could turn it into something bigger. That's kind of one of the big arts of trading. We'll have to do a trading episode. I think we could probably do several trading episodes on this show. One thing I really wanted to ask you about this, you touched on this briefly. So when you're trading some of the cards in your collection, just from me knowing firsthand what you have in your collection, in this kind of revolving collection, I picture in my head this revolving door where you could exit out through the door, through that threshold, or you could just keep spinning around, or maybe it spins around and whatever came out comes back in. At the last Dallas show I went to, you parted with 2 cards where people kind of said the same thing that you were talking about. Like, what? You sold those? I can't believe that. And they were your 52 tops Willie Mays and your 54 tops Hank Aaron. You ended up parting with those cards. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that it's impossible to get those again, but it would be difficult to get a comparable deal to what you got those for in the past. But would I be wrong to say that you could, in theory, go out and get those again if you really wanted to?
I could, in theory, I could definitely get those again if I wanted to, but there's no way that I could pay what I paid for them back when I bought them. I mean, that's not going to happen again. And, it's one of those things where, did I all of a sudden wake up one day and be like, man, I just don't like these anymore? No, that wasn't it. It's one of those things. It's kind of like what I talked about earlier. Like, when you're a person that's, at a certain income level, and that's, it's a steady income, but you only have so much available money as far as going towards the hobby. If you want to keep collecting in the way that I like to collect, you're going to have to make some sacrifices along the way. Like, you can't, there's no way I can keep everything and continue to go down this collecting path that I like to take. So there's going to have to be some sacrifices made. And yeah, it was tough. It was tough to let those two go, but I thought it was a fair deal. So
I would agree, knowing the details of the deal. Let me pose this. So we'll take it a step further. Is that you could go out and get an over 54 Aaron if you really wanted to. It's not like they're not available for sale.
sure.
Are you going to get a screaming deal? Probably not. But I mean, in theory, if they are available, there are cards that you have that may not necessarily be available just because, well, they are numbered and there is a known quantity out there. And what comes to mind is your Russell Westbrook gold prisms. And you have near the entire run of the Russell Westbrook gold prisms, or you have had that at one point in time. I don't know how many you're still holding on. Do you still have the whole run minus the 12 right now, or are you missing a couple?
I don't have the 12 or the 15. And I don't have the one from 2020. Yeah, I don't have that.
I forgot. That one doesn't count. We forget about that one. He's on the Rockets. So
that's an I have the first, like, he's on the Rockets on the 2019 one. And
oh yeah.
He's just standing there. Like the 2021, it's kind of an interesting one though, because I'm trying to picture the card, but I know that photo was taken in the bubble during the playoffs. And I'm pretty sure, like, it's a pretty neat picture actually, because I think it has him going up for a layup. And I think James Harden, and I want to say Luka might be in the background too. That might be one that I would consider, but really with Westbrook, I really kind of stick with the Oklahoma City stuff for the most part. He's kind of all over the place now. Like it seems like he's a different team every year. So yeah, I'm not gonna go after all that stuff. But yeah, but you're right about it's easier for me to trade or sell stuff that I know if I get the itch again to go back and get that, it's not going to be a problem. Like I won't be able to get the same copy of that Aaron or the Maze, but if I want to get one, I could. Now, when you get to the low serial numbered stuff, yeah, once it's gone, a lot of times it's just gone because some of that stuff gets locked up and never to be seen again.
Yeah, the two D's are often what we hear when those types of cards come available for sale: death, divorce. That's most often the cases where we see those types of cards. It's a very grim statement, but unfortunately, it's one that we've seen happen before. And I guess the beauty of it is that if you're going to take some kind of silver lining from a situation like that, is that those cards can then be cherished by someone else who hopefully, give them the same respect and admiration. That's when I departed with a large portion of my collection. That was one of the biggest rewards that I wasn't even anticipating when making that decision. But yeah, it is very tough, speaking from personal experience too, knowing that, those certain cards, like if you ever traded away one of those Prism Golds or sold one of them, odds are you will not get another opportunity at one. And also you don't have much control over it too, right? If let's say that it pops up around the holidays and you just spent, all your money on holiday gifts for everyone, payday's not till next Friday, and what do you know, this card popped up and you're not ready. Well, you better be ready, because if it's gone, it's gone, and it's probably not coming back for a while. So how do you, that kind of ties into the topic of FOMO, which we've discussed on the show before. How do you manage your FOMO, I guess, in that sense, or I guess your fear of letting go? So your FOLO in that case.
Oh, I mean, it can be somewhat painful if you really think about it. Like, I mean, as collectors, we all have stories about this card that we used to have that we sold and we wish we had it back, or we had a chance to buy this and we didn't. I mean, to me, those stories are they're fun to think about and talk about, but I'm usually able to kind of move on from that rather quickly because there's always something else out there. Like if I miss out on a card, I'll find something else pretty quick. And if I'm really missing a card that I used to have, I'll find something else too. So it's I don't let that bother me too much.
I think that's a healthy mindset too. When you become obsessive over one card, it can feel almost this is going to sound like hyperbole and it's going to sound absolutely ridiculous, especially if anyone happens to be watching this who's not a card collector, but like it would sound like a catastrophe for you if you missed out on a certain card or you had to depart with a certain card. So I want to push the envelope just one more step beyond that. We talked about the cards that you could, in theory, replace, the ones that you may not see again. Is there anything that you have that is truly off limits? It's not going in the showcase. It's not going to be traded. And how do you determine that something is, it has found its permanent residence with you?
Um, I mean, I do have a few of those cards, but they're not the ones that anyone would think about it being. Uh, like I have I have a card that's in my wallet that is this is a fun card. So it's a 1989 Topps baseball, Monty Ferris, and it's autographed. And if nobody out there knows who Monty Ferris is, I don't blame you. First of all, he was a he was a first round draft pick for the Texas Rangers. He played at Oklahoma State University, and he grew up in a small town that was probably like 30 or 40 minutes away from where I grew up. So the story with this card is my dad thought it was cool that a guy so close to us in a small town had got drafted, right? So he got this card and he actually he got this card autographed at a local rodeo that Monty Ferris was at, and he kept it for all these years. Like I said, this was back in he probably got this card signed probably somewhere back in the early 90s, I would say. So he had kept this card for all these years, and then a few years ago when my dad passed away, I found that card when we were going through some of his stuff, and I was like, yeah, this card, I'm keeping this one right here. So I found that thing and I put it in my wallet, and yeah, I've just had it there. So when I for me, cards that I'll never get rid of for any reason, it's stuff like that. It's not really like the one of one or the, Prism Gold or whatever. I mean, that stuff is it's cool, and of course I like it, but yeah, if it's something that I would never get rid of, it's going to be something that has like that really close personal story. And I'm sure you probably have something similar in your collection, and it's, may not be the most valuable thing, but it's valuable to you, right?
Yes, I totally agree with that. Uh, there was a contest response. My good friend Alex over at Palm Beach Sports Cards, where he did a contest. And those who are not watching this on YouTube or not familiar with it, basically it's someone kind of puts out like a prompt, and you make a video to respond to that prompt. And usually there's like some kind of prize for someone who wins the prize, but there's a lot of cool ideas that come from it. And he kind of talked about this idea of, what is your coffin card? So in theory, a card that you would be buried with or cremated with or whatever the case may be. And if you go through and watch a lot of the videos that were in response to that topic, so many of them are like the cards that Andy just talked about right now, rather than the ones we were talking about 10 minutes ago, those Prism Golds. And, to me, that's just, it it rings true on so many levels. Like there are so many things that I could say from that. For me personally, it just goes to show that you don't necessarily need to have the biggest, flashiest, most expensive cards to have a meaningful collection. You can do it with really just a few cards that mean a lot to you, which I think ties the bow together very nicely on our show. with that, kind of with that. Would you agree with that, or what's kind of your thoughts there?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, as far as the ones that people would consider to be the valuable cards, yeah, I have my favorites, but like the untouchable stuff, it's going to be something like that. I was thinking when you were talking too, like there is one other untouchable card that I would never move, and this is going to be a shot at one of our buddies, but the reason I would never move this card, and what I'm talking about, is a Mike Baseball Collector custom auto. The reason that one would never move is because, let's be honest, who else would want that other than us, right?
Yeah, I put those in my bike spokes from time to time. It makes a sound, that cool sound. But yeah, like that, those kind of things. Like those are, I have a full binder of cards that are just signed by people I've gotten to know in the hobby, and Mike's custom card is one of those ones that are in there. And it's just, those are the types of ones that you look back and they have so much attachment to you that, oftentimes because they're not worth anything, that would kind of inhibit you from even moving them in the first place. But the sentiment behind them is that even if in some bizarro world that, any of these became, huge collectibles, why would you even want to move them in the first place?
And in all seriousness, like much like yourself, like I do have a lot of those custom cards like that different people have signed and given to me, different YouTubers and stuff like that. And yeah, those are, that's the kind of stuff that's like, cool stuff like that from your friends. That stuff is obviously untouchable. For a variety of reasons, like we talked about with Mike's, but
right, for sure. Shout out to Mike, man. We love you. We gotta put you in your place every once in a while.
That's right.
So let's wrap up the show today. I feel like a lot of people are going to be interested in your approach, and I bet that there's going to be among those people a group that say, "Hey, I'm going to try this," and then maybe some will completely forget about it as soon as they click off of the podcast. But for those who are interested in your approach or even trying it out, what's kind of your collecting as a minimalist? That's easy for me to say. Collecting as a minimalist for dummies guide. Like what are the starter tips to kind of get into this mindset, and what are some of the things that you think people should consider if they're kind of liking what they're hearing from your style?
Well, first off, you have to be patient, because you're, kind of like you alluded to at the beginning when you were doing the intro, there's going to be times where there's not a lot of mail days coming in, because, you kind of get this target card in your head, and, you're saving, you've bought some stuff, so you have it off getting graded. So that takes time and money away. And then you get some of that stuff back. Some of it's going to be to keep, some of it's going to be to move to get towards whatever card is your goal. So you spend a lot of time like researching. You spend a lot of time enjoying other people's cards, which is nice. I spend way more time looking at probably other people's cards, like on YouTube and stuff, than I do my own. But yeah, patience is probably the key, because sometimes it's so easy to get distracted with whatever the new set that's out is like. And that's one thing that I've kind of gotten away from, is like, and it's mostly due to the price point, is, I used to be the person that I would go out and, buy retail stuff, and I like to open packs just like anybody else. But, it got to a point where that stuff was too expensive, and it was taking away too much money from the real goals that I had as far as what card I wanted to get next. So I guess to wrap it up, like a lot of suffering. You're gonna have to suffer a lot to do it the way that I like to do. You're gonna be watching all your friends buying all these cool cards and stuff, and you're gonna be like, man, that thing is cool. I wish I could go buy that, but I have to stay on track here.
I'm sure everybody's very encouraged and excited to get started on their minimalist path after that one. For those who aren't watching on YouTube, I'm cracking up to myself here, but we're laughing about it, but it is true. I mean, to do what Andy does, it requires tremendous focus, and there is a lot of distractions and a lot of noise out there in the hobby today, and you're not going to be able to chase every single release that's out there. In fact, you probably aren't going to be chasing any of the new releases, but ultimately you may feel that is more fulfilling. A short-term satisfaction. I feel that Andy's method, it's just not going to work if you're someone who wants that instant gratification. But yeah, I will totally back up what he said about patience. You're going to have to kind of pick your spots, and it's not always going to happen. I mean, Andy went to the National this past year and did not buy a card, and that sounds ludicrous, but I mean, there were opportunities where he went to, maybe try to make a deal, and it just didn't happen. And his friends gave him a lot of grief for that. Of course, I mean, how do you go to the National and not buy a card or acquire any kind of card? But it just didn't happen.
Now,
It just didn't happen.
In my defense, so first off, not only did I not buy a card at the National, I actually came back with a lot more money than I left with. But I think it was maybe like a month or two later, after I got back, that's when I bought the 1928 Harrington's Babe Ruth card. So some of the stuff that I was able to move at the National actually got me to where I could get that card. So I guess the best way to sum it up, the way I look at cards is like, whether they go up, down, sideways, whatever, I'm going to be involved in this. And so I take like a really long-term approach, I guess. Like I'm not worried about the immediate future of like this card or that card. I'm taking like a longer term approach because I know I'm going to be here. Some people, come in, get out, whatever. I'm here. I mean, it's just too much fun for me to not be here. So I enjoy it too much.
We're glad you're here, Andy. We'll keep looking forward to following your journey. But in order to do that, it is the shameless plug time. We need to know where we can find you, as always. So, what is your social media information?
So on YouTube, She Blinded Me with Refractors. Instagram, She Blinded Me with Refractors. I like over the last, I don't know, 6 to 8 months, I've been setting up with some friends at the Dallas card show. We're usually like in the small room right when you first walk in. So yeah. So if you want to see what kind of nonsense I'm up to and you're in the area, yeah, come by and say hi. It's always fun. Like to me, that's what those shows are all about too. Is like I have more fun just talking to people. Like I was joking with my brother the other day. I was like, even if I didn't have any cards to even put in the showcases, I think I would still get a table. I would keep my table spot and just go and hang out with the guys. Like I'd be like, yeah, guys, go ahead and go out to the floor and look around. I'll watch all of your stuff and sell it. It's just a lot of fun. I just love the interaction, and that's the great thing about all this. Like I know Mike already did, like him and Eric did a video on the National a day or two ago, and I'm so geared up for that. And like you took, you took a shot at me with the not buying any cards at the National last year. But dude, like honestly, like every year that I go to the National, whether I buy anything or not, like last year, that was probably the most fun I'd ever had at that show. Didn't buy a card. That's just what this hobby is. It's too much fun to leave. I can't understand when people leave.
Me either. And I only took that shot to show that you have tremendous willpower and it can be done. It was a compliment. It was not meant in a derogatory sense like that. I don't know anyone else. I remember listening on my drive up there. This is a complete side note. I was listening to another great podcast out there, John Newman, Sports Card Nation. talking about the National. He says, let's face it, you don't go to the National to not buy cards. And there was one person I thought of immediately as soon as I heard that line. And sure enough, but
I'm the only
I
guy.
enjoyed our time hanging out much more than any card I picked up at the show. So I will totally back you up on that, my friend. So.
Yeah, there's just there's so many stories that go along with those trips that Now, don't get me wrong, I'll probably buy a card or two this year at the show. I'm fully committed to buying cards this year.
We have it on video, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm sure that's, if there's ever a highlights clip of this show, that's going in there for sure. So
you can hold me to that, as long as, yeah, all right, just hold me to it.
I'll tell you what, if we get 100 likes on this video on YouTube, Andy will buy a card. How about that? I've never gotten 100 likes on any video before. That's not going to happen. But maybe the people will come together for this cause, and we'll get Andy to buy a card. But in all seriousness, Andy, this was an incredibly fun episode. I'm sure people can tell by my laughter. You made me think about some of my own decisions too, which I always like it when I get challenged and kind of about my own thoughts and get to reflect while doing this show. And I hope that everyone out there felt the same too. So in all seriousness, my sincerest thanks for coming on and putting up with me for the past hour.
Yeah, man, it's been fun. You asked some really good stuff. Like, I mean, this is not like the typical show where people are just like, giving you like layups. Like you asked some good questions. Like I had to think about this stuff, and I don't even know if I answered most of your questions, but I tried.
Hey, that's my goal, is to get you to think. And that is the goal for you out there listening as well. We greatly appreciate you listening. I forgot to plug this at the end of last week's show. But if you are listening to this now, if you're still with us, first of all, thank you for listening this week, as with every week. But if you have missed any episodes of the podcast, they are now compiled into a playlist that is linked down below. I had someone ask me privately if I would link it in the description. It is now there. So you can go catch up on all past 15 episodes prior to this one. And one quick note before we end today. My analytics say that 15% of our listening audience outside of YouTube listens from around the world, including countries such as Canada, Australia, Germany, the United Kingdom, Italy, and India. And that to me is just so cool. And shout out to my very special shout out to all of the international listeners out there for coming together and kind of discovering the show and listening to it and giving it a chance. It means the world to me, as well as all of my domestic listeners here in the United States as well. Thank you so much. But I thought that was really cool that we had, that kind of reach with the show. So
that's pretty awesome.
Thank you again for all of that. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. And if you want to see Andy back with, we can definitely, I think there's more legs with the two topics that we discussed today. Or if you want to hear more about something else that he has to say, hey, we'll bring him back in. We'll pay the fee to get him back on the show. Don't worry. But we'll be back next week with another show. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but looking forward to whatever that may be. But see you next Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, take care, stay safe, be kind, and collect what you love.